Hello, I'm Yonden Lhatoo at the South China Morning Post. Children should be seen, not heard, the old saying goes. I would usually agree this is archaic thinking that belongs in some dusty 15th century book of homilies, but its modern-day relevance slaps me in the face almost every time I take a flight and find myself trapped in a pressurized aircraft cabin with a bunch of crying and screaming kids for company. On one particular flight some years back, I was surrounded by at least a dozen young children who had been placed strategically around me to turn the torture dial all the way up to 11. Every time one of these tiny terrors let out a wail of entitlement or frustration or whatever fleeting self-indulgent emotion was the driving force for the moment, it would be picked up like a chorus by the others in surround sound, producing a cacophonic orchestral effect that gave me a splitting headache. Before I'm labeled a child hater by the global mothers mafia, let me clarify that I love children, as long as they behave. I just don't share parents' deep conviction that their progeny are cherubs descended from heaven when they behave like the spawn of hell. I do understand that infants can be traumatized by ear-popping under cabin pressure at 40,000 feet, but I'm talking about those who are obviously old enough to understand words more complicated than a simple shh. Some of these spoiled brats are like thugs on the rampage, enjoying the kind of impunity that only comes with the supreme confidence of knowing there will be no consequences. I'm against corporal punishment for children as a rule, but these mid-air menaces totally validate another proverb that is not as outdated as it sounds. Spare the rod, spoil the child. To parents who would argue that they should not be blamed for their children's obnoxious behavior in public because kids will be kids, allow me to call bovine feces. Let's face it, you've allowed your braying bambino to make your own life miserable, and that's fine, but inflicting that misery on the rest of us as collateral damage is just unacceptable. Many of us who have shunned our traditional breeding obligations as humans may be missing out on the joys of parenthood, sure, but the trade-off for the apparent lack of fulfillment in our comparatively lonely lives is peace and quiet. We've earned that. Offended parents might ask, are you saying we shouldn't bring our children, even if they're spoiled, onto a plane at all? The answer is a resounding yes, especially if they're miniature Godzillas that you've never bothered to discipline. Why not confront the parents of these ankle-biting anarchists, you might ask? Well, I used to, but I stopped doing that after I came close to blows some years ago on another flight with a protective parent who was annoyed that I was annoyed by his neo-Nazi nipper. I nearly ended up being booted off the plane for, and this is rich, disturbing the peace. To be fair, some parents admit culpability, like US comedian Jim Gaffigan, who says, traveling with 3- and 4-year-old boys is like transferring serial killers from a prison. You have to be constantly aware. Airlines should seriously start offering special flights once a week exclusively for parents with uncontrollable children. They can terrorize each other instead of innocent passengers. Of course, flight attendants who have to suffer should receive hazard pay for the extra effort. After that, any kids who throw tantrums on non-designated flights should be subdued and handcuffed, just like adults would be if they engaged in abusive or disruptive behavior. They're enabling parents too for aiding and abetting. It's been said before, but I'm saying it again. We talk so much about leaving a better planet to our kids. What about leaving better kids to our planet?